who suddenly walked away from a great music career to go work as a clerk at the railroad. Well, today I want to tell you about a Russian composer by the name of Mily Balakirev. Mily was born in 1837 into a modest, noble family. They didn't have a lot of money, but they did value education and culture. He started taking piano lessons as a young kid and showed a tremendous amount of promise. He showed an unusual ability to memorize music very well, and also was really good very early on at improvising at the keyboard. He went to the University of Kazan to study mathematics. Now, he was smart enough to do it, but his heart wasn't there. His real passion was music, so he decided to leave. He did not go to the conservatory. He never formally studied music anywhere, just like yesterday with Rimsky-Korsakov. So he continues his piano lessons, and then he is self-taught. He studies scores, he studies any books that he can on theory. He goes and listens to other people play, he has conversations, he is self-taught. But he decides, this is what I'm going to dedicate my life to. And then he kind of lucks out. He meets another man by the name of Lubashev, and he is a composer. He's also someone who has intensely studied Mozart. He is a music patron, and he sees this gift and this talent in this young man, and he starts helping him out. He starts mentoring him. He gives him access to this really rich, huge music library. And he also introduces him to all the greats at the time in the Russian music world. This mentorship and all these introductions and all this access, this helps him go from like this pianist wannabe into like a serious musician there. In the mid-1850s, he decides to move to St. Petersburg, which is the cultural capital of Russia at the time. He got a name for himself, mostly as a really good pianist, but also a brilliant musical thinker. But most importantly, this someone who is really intent on pushing a national cultural identity for Russian music. That was his desire. He became convinced that the Russians should find their own voice, no longer sound Italian, no longer sound German. And so he goes and he collects other like-minded composers that he finds. Now, yesterday we talked about Rimsky-Korsakov. He was one of those guys. So we have what we call the Mighty Handful, and these are 5 composers, all in St. Petersburg, and they're all helping each other. Now, this man, Balakirev, is the one that gets them together, and he's also really like the leader of the pack. Without him, this group would not have existed. I would think of his role as like the creative director of the whole thing. So yes, everybody has their own voice, but somebody is keeping people accountable. He never gets an actual official teaching position anywhere. But despite his lack of formal education, he is very aware of everything. He has a lot of knowledge, and he does take mentors on. And he mentors many young up-and-coming composers. Now, sometimes it is said that sometimes he is a very intense, almost aggressive, not like angry at the person themselves, but he's like really passionate, always believes that there could be more, there could be better inside. His teaching style was apparently very inspiring, demanding, occasionally domineering. So, yes, you wanted to work with him, but be careful, have a tough skin. His friend Rimsky-Korsakov had a student by the name of Tchaikovsky, and they worked very well together, but he introduced him to Balakirev, who also took him under his wing, and they worked together. They butted some heads, but they worked together quite a bit, to the point where Tchaikovsky actually dedicated one of his symphonies to him. Balakirev himself was a brilliant pianist. He had definitely put in his hours of practice, and so many of his compositions were piano, and they're very good. One of his more famous pieces is the Oriental Fantasy Islami. It goes very fast in the beginning. It's very exciting. But when it comes to like greater works, how instruments work together with different tones, the symphonies, that is very difficult for him. It took him 30 years to write his first symphony, and over his lifespan, he only wrote 2. But he did compose a lot for smaller groups and definitely a lot for piano. It appears that in 1871, he had a complete mental breakdown. We don't know exactly what caused this. It could just have been exhaustion. He was working very hard. It could have been frustration. He got very passionate about things. He was very upset that the school was allowing still a lot of German music in there. He also had some religious and psychological conflict that he was showing. There was also financial stress. It was probably a compounding of all of these things. And he became a clerk for the railway station, just pushing papers. Imagine that the fiery leader of Russian music nationalism is now working quietly in a railway administration. He's the one that was pushing the hardest for this Russian music. He's the one that got people together. He was the one educating, he was the one composing, he was directing, and all of a sudden he's just gone and working at a railway station. This was confusing for people, but I think he just needed the rest. His brain just couldn't go anymore, and that's okay. Over time, he gradually started coming back. It wasn't just like a sudden back. He started composing, he started conducting, a little bit of mentoring. Then he eventually became director of the Imperial Chapel in St. Petersburg, regaining some of his standing. As he got older, he continued to get more into religion and got really superstitious. Apparently, he went and visited this fortune teller quite frequently to figure out what he was supposed to do. He almost seemed lost and trying to find answers anywhere he could, but his anywhere was through religion and superstition. His work and his life is so filled with passion, so fiery. But he passed away alone very quietly at the age of 73 in 1910. The things he really was passionate about, that he really wanted to do, was to break free from the German and Italian music, to help develop a distinct Russian own music, help mentor new composers into this way of being, elevate national folk music and that way of being. And I think when we look back at his life and how he established this group of five, he did that. He was successful. I don't know if he knew it, I don't know if he felt it, but he was successful. There was a very distinct Russian sound in music. When I think of Russian music, and of course, then you have to think of these composers that he brought together. You can think of Rimsky-Korsakov as like the master colorist. He was such a great storyteller, and of Mussorgsky with as like dramatic realist. But Balakirev was the one that he was the spark. He's the one that lit the fire that really got this idea started. He reminds us that sometimes the most important figure in an artistic revolution might not be the most famous composer. It might be the one that's bold enough to say, we have to create something entirely our own. Let's go for it. Go and listen to Something by Mily Balakirev.